I want to start by talking about the stories that we tell about our communities. So the first time that I ever saw the natural beauty in the Berkshires was August of 2005. Now, I was born in Great Barrington in 1981. I lived in Pittsfield from 1981 until 1999 when I graduated and went to college. I was back and forth many times over those 4 years, probably too many times with dirty laundry for my mother's liking. But as I came back and forth, I always saw it here, but I never saw it. I lived in Washington, D.C. For a few years after college, working on Capitol Hill. And when I flew back that time, having worked on Capitol Hill to start a next chapter in my life, to head to grad school, that was the first time, maybe because I had been away for an extended period, where it really got me. As I drove over the hills from Albany back to Pittsfield, as I pulled in to the driveway in my family house, like many other times before, I said to my mother, "I can't believe how beautiful and green it is here." And she laughed a little bit. And she probably laughed because she remembered the kid growing up in Pittsfield who, being a kid in a big family in a relatively small town, always talked about how he wanted to get on the other side of those hills. And growing up when I did, in the 80s and 90s, was not a great time in Pittsfield or in the Berkshires. In 1981, when I was born, the population of the city of Pittsfield was 52,000. When I graduated high school and went off to college in Providence, the population was down to 46,000, a 12% decline over 2 decades. We heard often growing up about how good things used to be. And despite that, things still hadn't hit the bottom. I remember when we would go to Little League games that we had to time our trips to those games depending on which teammates we were picking up, because GE shifts would be coming off and there would be traffic and you would miss the first pitch or batting practice if you didn't time it just right, as thousands of workers would come out of those gates. When my father first ran for district attorney in 1990, being the oldest of 4, I was the only one who was consistently sent off with him to campaign events. In that time, one of my clearest memories is standing outside of the gates at General Electric with a few workers who were supporting his campaign and passing out flyers to the hundreds, if not thousands, of workers going to work on the 52-acre campus there, working on transformers or any number of other works being done on that campus. Also, being the youngest, I was then sent in to pick up the flyers that were quickly discarded in the garbage, which baffles me to this day that I have entered politics, since my first experience of it was picking flyers out of the garbage. At the same point, growing up on those same Little League teams, there were guys and girls who were on our team to start the season who weren't on our team midway through the season because their parents were told that they were either going to be laid off or they had to take a job in Virginia or Alabama. So the story that my generation heard about Pittsfield, about the Berkshires, because similar stories could be told in North Adams and Adams around Sprague Electric, in the hill towns and in the southern Berkshires around paper mills. The stories that we were told was that the best days of the Berkshires were behind us, that we ought to study hard, get into a good school, and not look back. That story didn't sit well with me growing up. It didn't sit well with me growing up because I was blessed to have 2 parents who taught the 4 of us and many others by their example, that of whom much is given, much is expected, and that community isn't something that just magically rains down from on high, but rather is people coming together to try and solve problems and give back to the community that's created opportunity for them. But I wasn't sure, quite frankly, how I was going to be a part of changing that story. So out of the blue, I got this opportunity to run for the state senate in 2006. And during that campaign and since, I realized it wasn't even so much that there was one story anymore being told in the Berkshires to young people and to the broader community alike, but rather now that there were these two competing stories. There were the stories, and are the stories, of marketing campaigns, talking about the wonderful cultural institutions that we have in this region, talking about the incredible natural environment in this region, talking about the sense of community in this region. All true, all 100% honest. And then there was another story, a story about a region in a state that is growing smaller, older, and poorer demographically, and has been for the better part of the last 3 decades, in a state where the population is growing, getting younger, and getting richer. How can those two stories be about the same place? But as everyone here who is lucky enough to know the Berkshires as home or as a place that they frequent knows, both of those stories are true. I think the biggest challenge that we face in the Berkshires today is understanding and accepting that both of those stories are true at the same time. Too often, people want to put themselves in one camp or the other. Either say that this is perfect and there is so much here and that's all we've got to talk about, for fear that if we dwell on the negative, that we will be stuck there, or that we can't talk about anything good that is going on. We need to focus on the problems. We need to talk about those problems relentlessly so that we get the resources and the attention of those problems to actually solve them. Let me try and talk about those stories in a different way. I think when a region goes through what this region has gone through over the last 30 years, the last 40 years, a loss of jobs that provided a pathway to economic security, a loss of jobs that defined the community in many ways, where in Pittsfield, we were Pittsfield and we built stuff there. In North Adams, we're North Adams and we built stuff there at the Sprague Electric. If we're Lee, then we're Lee and we built stuff in those paper mills. We all know all the stories. If you're in a community like that, when those jobs go away, no matter the reason for why they go or where they go, there is a sense in the community that we did something wrong. There is a sense that we did something wrong. And when you have that sense, when your story that you tell yourself as a community is wrapped up in one major institution, one major company, then when that goes away, you lose your sense of pride in your community. You walk around with your head down. And when you walk around with your head down, you don't see the hills. When you walk around with your head down, you see the cracks in the sidewalk. When we have been at our worst in the Berkshires over the last 20 years, the last 30 years, we've been fighting about the cracks in the sidewalk, and we've been ignoring the beautiful hills. Now, you can't ignore the cracks in the sidewalk and just stare off in the hills and say, aren't they beautiful off over there? We need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to be able to talk about how we are going to patch up those cracks in the sidewalk, and talk about what a beautiful community this is. We need to find a way to marry those stories together. There are plenty of communities that have gone through the challenges that Pittsfield's gone through, that North Adams has gone through, that the Berkshires as a whole have gone through. The question isn't, are we going to continue to face challenges? The question is, are we going to come together to actually solve them? We need to find a way to tell both of those stories. Yes, North Adams is a gritty little city in the northwestern county, the northwestern corner of the county, that faces all sorts of challenges economically, public health when it comes to the opioid crisis, and so much more. But it is also a 13,000 person town where everyone is willing to fight for everyone else. It's a 13,000 person town with a top 10 public liberal arts college in the nation, with one of, if not the most incredible contemporary art museum you would ever see, where hundreds of thousands of people come every single year to see some of the most incredible artwork on this planet. And yes, Pittsfield is a city in the hub of this cultural mecca that is the Berkshires. And it once was the hole in the donut, right? Where people would come to the Berkshires, visit South County, drive north and get somewhere else. If they had to pass through Pittsfield, they would, but they would do so only because they were out of gas or had to run to the restroom. But now it is a downtown where there is more activity in the downtown. We've invested in the arts and culture. You see young people moving to the downtown. All of this is possible in the same place. I guess what I'm trying to say is the glass is neither half full nor half empty, right? We have incredible challenges here in the Berkshires. We also have remarkable opportunities. The question before all of us who care about the Berkshires, who call the Berkshires home, who want it to be all that it can and should be, the question is, what are we going to do to make sure that we don't just focus on the cracks in the sidewalk, but that we use those beautiful hills, we use the beautiful surroundings, we use the incredible community this is to help not only patch those cracks in the sidewalk, but also be able to build up this community into everything that it can and should be. Is that possible? It's absolutely possible. There are plenty of other parts of the state of Massachusetts, there are plenty of other parts of New England, of this country, that would give anything to have a Norman Rockwell in their backyard, to have Kripalu in their backyard, to have the Berkshire Museum, to have the Berkshire Theater Festival, to have Barrington Stage Company. There are plenty of other parts of this country that would give anything to have a community college that is dedicated to economic development and partnership like the Berkshires have. There are plenty of other parts of the nation, small towns that have been through struggles, that would give anything to have made the right decision and to have never put a massive highway through the region, so that our small towns, downtowns are vibrant, so that we haven't had the type of sprawl that so many other places have. All of those solutions are obvious. The policy is there. I will tell you this, from my experience, the greatest asset that this region has, the greatest asset that we will be able to take advantage of when we marry those two stories, is the people. I have seen it over the last 10 years when you all have given me the opportunity and the honor to work in the state Senate and to be your voice there. I have seen it when we've been through challenges like the North Adams Regional Hospital closure. I've seen it when we've been through challenges and gang violence in Pittsfield. I've seen it in the faces of workers who went to work at paper mills in Lee and Lenox for a generation, only to find out that they were closing one day. In each and every one of those instances, people came together and formed community. They could have turned on one another. They could have said there is nothing that we can do. They could have said that there is nothing worth fighting for. In each and every one of those cases, in the darkest hours in our community, people in the Berkshires came together and said, we can solve this together. We can do this together. Doesn't mean it was always easy. Doesn't mean that we've even solved it yet. But people came together. That does not happen everywhere. I wish I could say it did. There is something special about these 32 communities in the furthest western reaches of Massachusetts. There is something special about these 32 communities that are on the border with New York and Vermont and Connecticut, that have another natural border in the hills. We might squabble from time to time, but when the chips are down, we all come together and we form community. That does not happen everywhere. The key for us, moving forward, making this county all that we know it can and should be, and becoming a model for other communities, is to get over the idea that we have to decide between focusing on the cracks in the sidewalk or just looking at the hills. We need to be able to do both, and when we are able to do both, we will harness the greatest strength that this region has, each and every one of you. Thank you very much.